So who will keep track? I guess we'll just all keep track if there's people that arrive that we can
then we can click in.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hello, everybody.
That's great. We're right on the dot at 3:30, so we'll give everybody another minute or so. Just join us. Feel free to leave your camera on and join in, but you can also feel free to turn it off and just sit back and relax.
Here's somebody. More people arriving.
Yeah.
I hope you guys have sunshine where you are. It's sunny on the island here.
Jessica and Roland, do you guys still have snow? No.
No more snow. It's fishing season now.
Okay. Hey, Janet.
Okay. I think we should get going. We'll probably have a few people joining us as we go. Feel free to put this on to gallery view where you can see us all, or speaker view, and you can just see one of us. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll just get going here. First of all, I would like to thank HCTF Education for putting this on. So your hosts today, myself, Jenny, and Sue and Steph, who will introduce themselves in a minute, are all Wild BC facilitators, one of the programs for HCTF Education. So as you can see here, there are a number of different programs that HCTF Education runs, and we're going to share the link in the chat so that you can learn more afterwards if you're interested, and you can feel free to ask us questions about HCTF at the end as well. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes. So to kick us off, as I said, my name is Jenny McCaffrey, and I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I'm so grateful to live, work, and play here on this land. And my favorite thing to do in spring, we're all going to share a little tidbit, is to grow a vegetable garden with my kids. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but that's been such a joy this year for me. So we're going to talk about that and how that can be done in your classrooms as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Steph.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Weinstein, and I'm also a Wild BC facilitator with HCTF Education. And I'm very grateful to live on the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations in Victoria. And my favorite thing about the coming of spring is visiting the Garry Oak ecosystems, which are really unique in Canada, and they're filled with wildflowers, and they're just so beautiful. And there's so many birds and butterflies and pollinators, and I'll be outdoors looking at some pollinators with you later in the webinar today. And on to you, Sue.
Thank you, Steph. Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all and be celebrating spring. Sue Staniforth here, and I'm joining you from the Comox Valley. I'm really grateful to live and work and play in the unceded territory of the Coast Salish and Comox First Nations. My favorite thing to do in spring is actually wait and listen for the frog songs when they start. And lucky enough to hear them all night long through some neighbors' ponds. So such a great sort of sign of spring. And I'm wondering, while we're doing a little bit more intro, we'd love to hear where you folks are all from. So can you drop into the chat where you live or where you're joining us from? I'll pass it back to Jenny.
Great, thanks, Sue. Okay, while everyone's doing that, I'm just going to share with you our plan for the day. So after we get through some of these introductions, we're going to talk about the science of spring, get a little bit more into that gardening. We're going to get outside with Steph, and she's going to show us some exciting stuff. And then we're going to talk about some weather, and then we're going to let you walk away with some activities that you can share with your classes or your students or whoever you want next week on Monday. So that's the plan for the day. I'm going to stop sharing here. And just to get a feel for who's with us today, I'm going to launch a poll here. So I see that everyone's already entered their locations into the chat, which is awesome. So if you could just answer that poll, it should be hopefully popped up in the screen in front of you. And we just want to know if we've got teachers or educators, parents, interpreters, youth leaders, who's joining us today. Oh, it's great to see where everyone is joining us from. This is fabulous. All over. Awesome. Okay, I'll give you couple more seconds here for the poll. All right, I'm going to share that with everybody. So there we go. We've got mostly teachers on the call today, which is great to know. I would love to know who the others are. If you want to pop that into the chat, that would be awesome, so that we can help make this as relevant for you as possible. Okay. I'm going to stop. Oh, did I? You already saw those results, didn't you? Sorry. It shows it to me and then it doesn't show it to everyone else. Okay, so let's jump into the science of spring. I'm going to pop back to my PowerPoint here. Sorry, Steph, go ahead.
Oh,
I can hear you.
I just took a breath because I was just remembering maybe we want to say a little word about our door prizes and also the word cloud.
Great idea.
Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll be randomly selecting 3 people from our participants today. We've got some great prizes for you, some pollinator identification cards, some seed to tree identification cards, and pollinator guides. So later on in our program, we will announce who those winners are, and we'll get you some of those great resources.
Thanks.
And then we just wanted, are we going to do the word cloud too?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. So Jenny's going to do a cool visual later. So we just wanted to have everybody think for a moment about how you feel when you're outdoors in the spring, and just type one word in the chat now, if you could do that. How you feel outside how you feel when you're outdoors in the spring.
All right, so we're going to come back to those in a little while. Please just feel free to add them in. And just as a reminder, please mute yourself if you're not speaking, but you're welcome to unmute and ask us questions as we go. So don't be shy. You can use the raise hand function. You can use the reactions. You can pop your questions into the chat, because all of us will be monitoring as we go. So I want to talk a little bit about beans, and this is one of my favorite ones with kids to do. This is bean seed. So these are the ones that you see in this picture. I'm going to hold it up. Well, it's not super easy for you to see on the screen, but you can see it right there. And this is a really fabulous one to do in your classroom, because you can start these seeds out in little bags. And I'll go into a little bit of detail in a minute, but this is what I started with. So I'll show you the details of this in a minute. I've just got a little Ziploc bag with a wet piece of paper towel and a couple of seeds, and this is a piece of tape. And so once I put all that together, you tape them up on your windowsill, and in a couple of days, you'll start to see that bean seed germinating. Now, as we were preparing for this webinar, every week I was putting bean seeds in these, Ziploc bags with water, and I was marking them. So I started in April. Every Friday, I would do this so that we could see, how the beans were going. And of course, the first time I did this with my kids, we taped them to the window and everything worked perfectly. And when I did this for the webinar, I forgot to tape them to the window, and I had them laying on my windowsill. And there wasn't that gravity piece that is so important for the bean. as that first little radicle, that little bit of root kind of climbs out and down, it needs to feel that gravity to know where to go. And every single bean I put in those plastic bags, I had them marked. I had, every single week for 4 or 5 weeks, all of them ended up rotting, which I was very sad about. But luckily, I had some in my garden as well. So I'm just going to tilt my screen down so that you can see what I've got here. And this is what should have happened.
Hey, Jenny, can you stop sharing your screen?
Oh,
so we can
of course.
See more,
sorry,
more
you can just see a
picture?
tiny little one. Thanks, Sue. There we go.
That's great. That's way better.
Sorry about that, everybody. Here, I'm going to show you my little Ziploc bag again, just in case you missed that. Thank you, Sue, for mentioning that. So here we go. I've got a few different stages here ready for you to see. So this is kind of fun. Now, this little guy, you can see has germinated not too long ago. You can't see the seed coat anymore. I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. The seed coat has come off, the cotyledon here, and you're just seeing that primary root coming out and a tiny little bit of foliage. Hopefully you can see it. It's hard for me to hold it right in front of the screen there, but you can see it breaking apart. And then I've got another one that's a little bit farther along. I'm going to hold that up. You can see that the cotyledon has broken apart there. We've got a root that's all over the place here. A little bit more foliage coming out. We've got a little bit up the top. And then this one's been in the ground for a few weeks. You can see how long it is. Something's been munching there. Maybe we'll hear from Steph what might have been eating that in a few moments. And you can see now the root. We've got the primary roots and the lateral roots, and we've lost the cotyledon altogether. So this is a really fun activity that I love to do in classrooms, because once you can either do it in these bags, but you can also do it in a glass jar, and you can have it right up against the edge so that the students can see them as they grow. So let me pop my screen back up, and I'm just going to share with you a little coloring sheet that we've got. Every single thing that we talk about today, we will send you afterwards. We've got all of the links and everything ready to go. So this is just a really fun coloring sheet that you can add all the different bits and pieces. So here's the seed coat. Hopefully you can see my little arrow there. Here's the seed coat falling off. And that's what I didn't have an example of here in my beans, but you can see everything else starting up there. So this is what you need if you want to do this in your classroom. Really, really simple to get started, and you get a ton of beans in just a little seed pack like this. And you pop it together. All right. So I'm going to pass this. I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to join Steph outside.
All right. Can you hear me, everybody?
We can hear you.
We can.
Okay, great. So please let me know if you have any trouble hearing or seeing me. Just put it in the chat, and then Jenny or Sue can let me know. So welcome to my backyard and to Wild Wednesday. If you've been with me before, you can see it's spring now. And also you'll know if you've been here before that I like to start any of my outdoor time with a quick sensory warm-up. So I'm just going to run through what you can do with your students when you get outdoors. So we start, and you can do this along with me in front of your computer screen, but of course it's much better when you're outdoors. So just rub your hands together really fast, generate some heat to warm up your sense of touch, and then feel the energy and the tingling in your fingertips. And then we do this going through each of the senses. So the next one I'm going to do is my sight. So I cover my eyes and then look up, look down really close at the ground, look all around, and notice things that you may not have noticed before. And then we'll do hearing. Hearing is great with students because it makes them be silent, and you can make deer ears to gather sounds from all around you and hear things very differently by putting your backward ears on as well. And then for taste, what
you would do is remind students that they shouldn't be tasting anything outdoors unless you have something that you want to present to them, or they could taste a raindrop or taste the air like a snake. And then for smell, we're going to do a little something different to warm up our sense of smell. If you brought a piece of plant with you, which we had asked you to do, but no problem if you didn't, take a little sniff of it now and smell it, and put in the chat what it smells like to you, what the smell of spring is like. A way to get some of those smells to come out even more is to crush it, to rub it between your fingers. And you wouldn't do this during COVID in a classroom, but if you're if you're at home or somewhere where it's okay to lick your finger and wet the area beneath your nose, then try smelling again, because it really brings out the smells when you have that wetness there, like a dog. And plants have so many different smells, and they're a whole pharmacy of compounds. So crushing them and helps bring out some of those compounds. I had a botany professor who could identify plants just from their smell without even looking at them. So those are things that help to protect them from herbivores, or maybe to attract pollinators. So a fun activity that you can do with your students around smell is when you're walking along a trail or in the schoolyard or in their backyards is what I call nature's perfume. So you can just gather some materials that are on the ground, some natural materials that have fallen, some leaves or sticks. I've got a dandelion here. And as you're walking around, just to gather them up, maybe talk about whether or not picking is allowed. If you're in a place where picking is permitted, maybe just the size of a fingertip. And you just need a small container and a stick, and have them crush it and mix it, make a potion. Young children love this. And then smell it. And everybody's nature's perfume will smell differently depending what they have. And then they can share and smell each other's nature's perfume. And then pile everything in when you're done into one big heap for the slugs or for the birds or the squirrels as an offering. So that's nature's perfume. So we enjoy the flowers and the colors and the smells of spring, but the whole purpose from a plant's point of view to make a flower is to reproduce and to produce seeds. And that process is pollination. And pollination, I'm just going to show with these pretend flowers for now, is the process by which pollen from the male parts of the flower is transferred to the female part of the flower, and that fertilizes it and creates a fruit with seeds inside. So that's a cool fact for those who didn't know, that flowers can be male or female or both. So some plants, like this oak, have tiny flowers that are really inconspicuous, that produce a lot of pollen, that are pollinated by the wind, transferred by the wind to the female flowers on the same tree to produce their fruit, which is an acorn. And other flowers are more what we think of, my little bouquet here, very colorful, fragrant flowers that have nectar that attract pollinator animals. So the nectar is a sugary sweet reward. Pollinators are also attracted by the colors and the smells. And then they transfer by accident a little bit of that pollen to another flower of the same type to produce the fruits. So I'm hoping we can look a little bit closer at some flowers and some pollinators. So I'm just going to get my binoculars, my homemade toilet paper roll binoculars, and look around for some flowers and some pollinators. And oh, I think I see something. I'll be right back. Hang on. Hello. I found a bee. I'm a bee. This is a fun thing to do. And I've got my little bee body. And I'm going to show you up close how pollination works. So here I've got a tulip. And I'm going to teach you a second language, which is the language of botany, but you don't need to worry too much about the terms. It's just to look a little closer. So here we've got the tulip. These parts here are the male parts. They're called stamen. So you can remember stamen, men, the male parts. And this is where the pollen is produced, on the very tip. It's just the anthers. So the bee would come along, drink some delicious nectar, gather some pollen to put in its little pollen baskets or on its hairy body, because bees also eat pollen and use pollen for their eggs and for their queen and for their brood. And then they would fly to another flower and, oh, accidentally, some pollen came off right on to the female part of the flower. This part is sticky and it's called the stigma, the sticky stigma. The pollen would stick to that and then travel down here and make a fruit. So that's how pollination works. So you can do this with a Q-tip with your students. They can go around the schoolyard, look for flowers, identify where the pollen is coming from, and pollinate some different flowers. So I'm going to take this off now. Could you all see those flower parts okay? Are you there?
Yeah, they look good, Steph.
Okay, great. So I just want to show you some of the flower parts a little better here. Okay, there we go. So here's another flower. Here's a rhododendron. And you can see here, these are the stamens all around there. And the little thing that looks like a sesame seed are the anthers. And this is the female part, the pistil, that would produce the fruit. Now we think of fruits as something like an apple that's sweet and delicious that we want to eat. But fruits, as far as a plant is concerned, is just something for its seeds to be delivered in. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, is if you see a flower, it's going to make a fruit. And if you see a fruit, it means it was pollinated and it came from a flower. So usually we don't think about eating tulip fruits for breakfast, but here are some various fruits from different plants. So you can see here's the tulip, and this is it's done flowering. This is its fruit right there. And then here is an old daffodil. The flower is done, and the swelling here is its fruit. If I were to cut it open, you would see the seeds that are just starting to form. I tried doing it, but it was too small to show you very well on the camera. This was the rhododendron, and that is the developing fruit. And here are some old fruits that had the seeds inside. Okay. So some flowers are actually specialized to have only certain types of pollinators come and pollinate them. So pollinators can be anything from butterflies, we think of bees, honeybees, and there's many, many different types of native bees. There's also hummingbirds, moths, ants, beetles, many types of flies and wasps. There's so many different kinds of pollinators. But some flowers only want a certain type. And I'm going to show you a really cool example. Sorry, I'm just going to put this down here and switch you around again. So this is a shooting star, which is native to the Garry Oak ecosystems. And I hope that's in focus there. Having a little bit of a trouble zooming, so I'm just going to bring it close. But it is pollinated just by bumblebees. So the male parts that have the pollen are hidden away. They're tucked away here, and they don't just give their pollen out to anybody. You have to have a secret password, and the bumblebees have it. And so what they do is they grab on to the anthers with their jaws, and they use their flight muscles to make this strong buzz. And the buzz has a vibration that causes the anthers to release their pollen in a cloud. We have a cool video that we'll send you of this. And so then they go on to the next flower and they do the same thing, this buzz pollination, to make the anthers kind of explode all their pollen out. And that helps it to make its seeds to pollinate it. Here's a borage fruit flower, which has a similar type of structure. Tomatoes also do the same thing. So they're pollinated just by bumblebees. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so pollinators are amazing and they're diverse and they're really important, and they are not just honeybees. Most people think of honeybees as being our main pollinators. And they are important, and all these pollinators they say that they are responsible for 1 out of 3 bites of every food that we eat. But it's not just honeybees. There are over 450 species of native bees in British Columbia. And most of them are solitary, which means they don't have a colony. So they don't sting to defend themselves. And they've been here pollinating our native plants for thousands of years, even before honeybees came onto the picture. And it's really interesting to watch flowers, just to go flower watching and see what you can find. So I'm just going to show you some great tools that we have that you can use to do that. First of all, another fun thing you can make with your students is a sit-upon. It's just a piece of cardboard covered in a plastic bag and duct tape. And then you could sit down, have a nice dry seat, find a patch of flowers, and take a look and see what comes to visit. There are some wonderful identification guides to help you figure out what you're looking at. So this is by Nature Kids BC. We'll send this to you. Life in the Flowers ID cards. And we also have, thanks to Juniper English, who's with us today. We have, and this is one of our door prizes, Hives, Webs, and Slime, also available in French. And it's an identification guide to signs of insects and other invertebrates in BC. And it does include some of our flower visitors and pollinators. So this is a kind of bee called a leaf cutter bee. It's also called a hairy belly bee. So you would recognize it by its body covered in pollen, like it has a hairy belly. And if you see these telltale signs of semicircular cuts on a leaf, it could be from a leaf cutter bee that uses the leaf to line its nest sites. So those are some of the tools that you can use when you're looking at flowers. There's also a citizen science app called Insight that has great guides to pollinators, and you can just record what you find and share it with scientists to learn more about pollinators. So I encourage you to get outdoors this spring and maybe make some nature's perfume, perhaps be a pollinator, look at some plant parts and pollinate some flowers, or look for life in the flowers. So thanks very much. I'm going to join you back indoors.
Thanks, Steph. All right. So while we're waiting for Steph to head back in, it was just Mother's Day. So for those of you who want to do a little bit of dissection and might have received a flower bouquet, these are great to take into the class because it's so obvious. Hopefully you can see on the camera right there. Got all of that pollen and the stickiness at the top. Anyway, that's a really fun one to take into class. All right. So I'm going to we'll share some of these as well, but I know it's sometimes hard on the screen to see all these different pieces, but there they are. And Steph should be joining us any second, and she's going to talk a little bit about pollination. But while she's joining us, feel free to pop into the chat or unmute if you've got questions and throw them at us.
Thanks, Jenny. Great. So this just shows a little animated photo of how pollination works. So the pollinator visits the flower to collect nectar. So that could be the same with a moth, a mouse, a hummingbird, a bee. The thing about bees is they are specialized to go to flowers, whereas some of the other ones have other food sources. So the pollen from the anther sticks to the pollinator, and then they need to move to another flower, and it's transferred to the stigma, just like I showed you outdoors. One thing to mention is that pollen might look just like yellow dust to all of us, but the next slide, please. Thank you. Under microscope, it's actually really diverse in its size, form, color. And so plants only recognize pollen from their own species. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so this is a guide to yellow stripy things. It's actually really amazing that there are a lot of things that come to flowers that look very similar. And some of them, fly, bee, or wasp, how can you tell? Some things that don't sting, like flies, can be pollinators. There's some flower flies and bee flies, and they mimic these other animals to protect themselves from birds or other insects that might want to eat them and think that they sting. Okay, so don't advance yet. Maybe put your ideas in the chat or think about it in your mind. Number 1, 2, or 3. Which one is the bee? Which one is the wasp? Which one is the fly? And what makes you be able to tell them apart? I'll just give you a moment there. All right. Oh, nobody's guessing. Oh, there we go. Great. Oh, wow, you guys are good. Oh, I'm impressed. Okay, well, I'll wait one more second, then we'll do the big reveal. Okay. Eye size. Eye size a clue. Number of wings is a clue. The body shape is different. Something else, antenna length. Very good. All right, so let's show you. Number 1 is a bee. So they have hairy body with pollen collecting hairs or baskets, although some flies can also have a hairy body to mimic them. Their body's a little bit rounder than a wasp. It's hard to tell unless you have one right in front of you and it's not moving, but they do have 2 sets of wings, and you can see its antennae are elbowed. Okay, number 2 is easier. It's a fly because it's got the ski goggle eyes. It does not have any pollen collecting hairs. It's got a chunky body. Flies only have 1 set of wings. And also you can see its antennae are really short and stubby at the middle of its head there. And so the last one is a wasp. Wasps have narrow waists, very narrow waists and abdomens. It doesn't collect pollen at all, except for by accident, but it doesn't collect it as part of its life cycle. It has 2 pairs of wings and long antennae. Great, thank you. All right, we thought I would just quickly mention the Asian giant hornet because I know that's on some people's minds. There are lots of things that look like Asian giant hornets that are not. And I thought it was pretty cool that there's a whole hashtag that is not an Asian giant hornet. And it's really neat to see, for example, here, this is just one picture I chose, a European hornet. And it's similar, but a different kind of striping pattern. And it's also smaller. There's even things like moths and things like that that some people think are Asian giant hornets. They're the largest hornets in the world. They have arrived recently by accident, probably on shipping containers. And sorry. Oh, I was just trying to admit somebody. And so if you see one, you should let bcinvasives.ca, there's a way to report one if you see them, but the nests have been found in Nanaimo several years ago. They have been sighted in just over the border in Washington, but the vast majority of reports are actually not Asian giant hornets. All right, here we go. So I was going to show you in person, but it doesn't work very well over the camera. So I just thought I'd take some photographs. I was able to get a hold of some of the collection from the University of Victoria, the entomology collection of just some bees and pollinators. So I mentioned outdoors that there's over 450 species of just native bees to BC, and of course many other types of pollinators. So that's just a sample of the pictures. So here's some from the collection, another little game for you. So just an idea of some of the diversity. Any ideas? Guess in the chat which ones are the bees. I'll just give you a moment. Or think in your mind. And okay, 3, 2, 1. All of them are bees. Even number 6 is a bee. So number 1 is a honeybee, and number 2 is a bumblebee. And then many of these actually were not labeled, so I'm not entirely sure. Number 4 I know is called a sweat bee, halictid. Number 5 is a mason bee, orchard mason bee, but there's many different shapes and sizes of bees. Okay, next. Now, which ones are pollinators and which ones are bees? 1, 2, or 3. You can look at the eyes, the antennae. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Fly, number 1 and number 2 are both flies. They're called flower flies, and they are pollinators. Number 3 is a bee. And which ones? And they are all pollinators. I know, it's very surprising. There's so much about pollinators to learn. And here's the last one. They're both shiny metallic green. Would you ever think a bee would be shiny metallic green? And which one's a pollinator? Okay, there we go. Number 1 is a fly. Number 2 is a bee. And in this case, only the bee is a pollinator. That fly is like a type of house fly. It would just be buzzing around your house trying to get at all your food and things like that. All right. I think that's all I have to say about pollinators and insects. So, was there anything else or any questions? Or are we ready to hand it over to Sue?
Just for one quick minute while everyone's asking questions in the chat, and we're about to hand it over to Sue to talk about weather and clouds, I thought I would share our cloud that we created here. So hopefully everybody can see our word cloud, and it looks like the word of the day is refreshed, followed closely by happy and relaxed. And we do this at every single webinar, and it's such a fabulous activity because these are all, we always get the same words. You know, sometimes they're in a little bit of a different order, but that happiness, that calm that comes from being outside in nature is just a really fabulous gift that you can give your students. And if we feel this way when we're outside, so are your students. So I think that this is something that we hope that you take away from this, is that shifting that learning outside, whatever it is going to make them happier and a little bit more relaxed and calm. All right. So speaking of clouds, I'll pass it over to Sue.
Thanks, Jenny. Great segue from clouds to actual clouds. I was just thinking it's always hard to come after Steph. I should at least have like a cloud hat or something. We're going to reverse that next time. Anyway.
My face mask.
I'm just going to share my screen with you folks. There we go. Hopefully that's clear. So I want to talk about weather today, and weather, like, why talk about weather? Well, it's a great topic. Like, we all talk about weather a lot, at least I do with my family and friends. You know, it basically impacts pretty well everything we do. You know, whether it's whether it's what we wear, what we end up doing for recreation, our transportation abilities, even our electricity, and even the food that we eat and the type of food that we can actually grow and get access to. So weather is, hugely impactful of all our lives. And I think the best part is weather is always available for us to study, especially in the spring because it's so changeable. So, you folks probably know the definitions here, but a lot of people confuse these two terms, weather versus climate, which is understandable because they're often used interchangeably, which sometimes drives me nuts on weather on news stations. So weather is essentially what's happening outside right now. So what's going on outside? They're basically short-term changes in the atmosphere. And climate is essentially looking at the weather over a long period of time in a certain spot. So, we can all we live in a really dry area or a chilly, cold northern area, but, the weather is going to be quite specific for most of the time to those regions of the planet. And so those climates are going to be quite different. These are big extremes, obviously, that I'm showing you here. And one of the things I learned, which I thought was a bit odd, is that when they talk about climate normals, they only look at about 3 decades to say that's normal for that climate. And I'm curious to see with climate change if that's going to change as we go. But that's your climate normal that meteorologists use. So studying weathers, weather station, it sounds very scientific. But essentially it's a place where there's equipment to study the weather or to study the atmosphere. And this can be really simple to quite complex, these kind of tools. So the tools we're going to show you here are really simple ones. These are really fun ones to make, like a weather vane with, the rocks with the north, south, east, and west painted on them. This is a wind anemometer, a way to measure wind speed using paper cups. And this is actually a really easy rain gauge. So these are really simple tools. You can get quite complicated, and with high school students, we've done much more complicated weather stations, but it's actually really fun. It's a fun thing to add to your nature journal, to actually say what's the weather doing outside now? What's the weather doing in this season? And measure it for a day or a week or a month, and then check it as we move in through the seasons. So cloud charts or viewers, weather vanes, wind gauges, rain, those are sort of the basic pieces, and we'll send you the links to how make some of these activities. But what I really want to talk about today is our clouds. And I've gotten really into clouds of late, much to the chagrin of my husband. I keep identifying them at breakfast. But clouds are very cool. And there's a great quote from a meteorologist about they write a weather journal on the sky. And they really help us understand patterns of weather and also climate. They affect the Earth's temperature, and they also control our climate to a great extent. And just like the weather, I think the best part about studying clouds is they're usually out there somewhere to study. So unlike lots of natural phenomena that we try to go out and find, you can usually find a cloud, especially on Vancouver Island. So naming clouds I found really interesting. And this was done in about the 1800s. There was a British amateur meteorologist. His name was Luke Howard. And I guess he got in trouble continually as a student for looking out the window and looking at clouds, but he was actually the first person to name clouds. And he used Latin terms to classify the 3 types or forms of clouds, because he realized from all his cloud watching that clouds have many individual shapes and they're always changing, but there's really sort of 3 sort of basic or classic forms. So he used Latin terms. The term cirrus means hair or tendril. And these clouds are the high clouds that we see way up in the sky. Some of the highest clouds up about 10 to 12 kilometers. They're made entirely of ice crystals, and that gives them that beautiful feathery look. The second type of clouds he named are cumulus. Cumulus means pile or heap, which is, I think, a great name for these clouds. And one meteorologist calls these the cloud of choice for 6-year-olds. You know, when you want to draw a cloud, or actually my artistic ability, you draw a cloud and it's this fluffy blob of, of white stuff. And it's a sort of a happy cloud. It's generally often a fair weather cloud too, when we see a cumulus cloud. And then the stratus cloud, the same meteorologist talks about these clouds weigh heavily on your mood. And these are the sheets or layers, you know, or these sort of heavy cloud cover that we often see, you know, you know, when it's going to rain, or you know, just when there's a lot of overcast clouds. These are the lowest clouds in terms of the atmosphere, and they're actually called fog. When they're earthbound, you know, the stratus cloud, when it's heavy and low, it's termed fog. So there's obviously tons of intermediate cloud types. You know, if a group of fluffy cumulus clouds gets together and joins together and spread, it's called a stratocumulus. All the different combinations of many types of clouds, you know, have been named over the years. There are many different cloud charts. This is the one from NOAA, which is a good Skywatcher chart. There's lots of detail on this one, many great charts, talks about the high, medium, and low clouds, as well as some crazy ones like tornadoes and wall clouds and things. This is the one I've used a fair bit with older students, like high school students. But I've had trouble using cloud charts, because often you're trying to hold them up and you're trying to kind of get a sense of a cloud that's maybe in the middle of the chart, but you can't quite figure it out from what you're seeing. So I found this very cool activity. It's actually activity for, you know, pretty young kids, but I love it because it's a cloud viewer, and essentially you make a cloud viewer out of just a frame. So you can use these giant popsicle sticks, you know, pieces of wood, cut out chunks of plastic, even thick cardboard, make a frame and then put a handle on that frame. And then essentially you use that frame to frame a cloud in the sky, and you stick the types of clouds, the main types of clouds, around the edge of that frame. So you have the types of clouds right there. So these are obviously animated pictures. So we'll send you this activity and this sheet of clouds that you can cut out and stick on if you'd like. But then you've got this frame, and you can hold up the cloud viewer, and you can literally frame a cloud and try to figure out what it is, you know, with the clouds right around that frame. So I thought it was such a cool idea. So you can take a look and you say, okay, if that looks like kind of like a cirrus, I think, but it might be, you know, changing into a cumulus. But it's just a fun kind of activity and a fun tool that's pretty easy to make. And I found this nice chart of the 9 main types of clouds, which, you know, you might prefer to cut these ones out because they're actually photographs of the clouds versus the more animated pictures. But a fun fact that some of you might know is, as they've named the clouds, the first 3 and then the next 4, and then the last cloud to be named was the 9th cloud, or cloud 9. And the 9th cloud is essentially the big towering high cumulonimbus, the big thunderhead cloud, which is the big tallest cloud we ever see. So the term, you know, if you're on top of cloud 9, you're on top of the world, actually makes sense to me, and to why you know, why it was named that. So it's kind of a fun fact that you can use at your next cocktail party, if we ever get back to those, or dinner party. All right. So we've got a little demonstration now. I'm going to pass it over to Jenny, but before I do that, I want to show a really fun cotton ball cloud. I guess it's a cloud ID chart. It's a big one that Stephanie's daughter made. Steph, do you still have it there that you can show?
Yeah, I do. Okay, so
I'm going to stop sharing. Hang on.
Yeah, my daughter, Rita, I was telling her about clouds, and she got very curious and interested in this activity. So we got some cotton balls and cotton batting from the dollar store, and she made this chart with the kilometers and the different types of weather, and glued and picked apart cotton balls to make different types of clouds. So here's the cumulus, here's some cirrus clouds on the top, and what's this one? Cirrostratus. So she labeled them all, And it got her, she really loved doing it. She loves art. She also loves nature. And then she started to teach all her friends about clouds as well. So that was a really great activity, thanks to Sue. And thanks to my daughter
Yeah, thank
for
you, Rita.
sharing
That's so
that with
great.
us.
amazing.
So Jenny, I'm
All
going to
right.
pass it over to you. Are you ready for your demo?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All
So
right.
I'm just going to tip my screen so that everyone can see my jar of warm water here. And now it has been sitting here for a while. So I'm not making any promises, but this is just a fun activity you can do in the class to create a cloud. So you got to start with a little bit of warm water in a jar, have a match, and I don't have the best track record with fire, but we'll see what happens. So you light your match and just hold it in there for a second, as low as you can get, let it go, and then pop a balloon. So I just cut the bottom of a balloon, and that worked really well to cover up the jar. Now, when I put the warm water in here, some of it turned to vapor. So as the air cools, the water vapor in the jar condenses, as you probably know. Now, the cool thing is that condensed water vapor is able to collect. I'm just doing this so that you can actually see and you don't see the water on the side of the jar. Now, the condensed water vapor is able to collect on those smoke particles that I created from the match. And so in a couple of minutes, you'll be able to see a cloud form. Now, the way that I'm hopefully going to get you to see this cloud is that when I press down on the top of that balloon, the pressure, I'm going to hold it against my shirt so we can see here. Oh, there we go. Could everybody see the cloud forming? So when I press down and create the pressure, the water vapor, oops, doesn't collect. And then as soon as I let that go, it collects on the smoke particles and creates that cloud. So no cloud, cloud. I'm hoping you're able to see that a little bit.
Yeah, we can see it, Jenny.
Okay, good.
Great.
That's a fun, easy one. You can also do, there's a couple other ways to do this and we'll share those with you, but that's just a really fun, easy one to do. I'll let that air out.
Whoa, the cloud escaped.
The cloud escaped. So we also have some prizes to share, and I know that maybe we'll do that just before we share our last few slides. Does that sound good to everyone, or should we do our, Sue, maybe you can share your screen with the Monday Ready activities and I'll announce our winners here.
Sure.
So while you were learning all about clouds, we just threw all your names into a random name generator. So we've got 3 winners, and we'll contact you. We'll send you a quick email, and then we'll get the office will send you one of those fabulous prizes. Our winners are Monica, Christine, and Diana. So
Bravo.
hopefully you'll enjoy all those. Yay. Okay, I'll pass it over to Sue.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so we wanted to leave you with the specific activities that we shared with you today. So the first one, of course, that Jenny showed is the bean experiment. So growing those big scarlet runner beans with your students or with your students at home. Then the next one is nature's perfume, or some people call it forest cologne. Mixing all those fabulous natural scents up into a little Dixie cup or a little container, and smelling them, and describing the smells maybe in your nature journal or with each other to pair share. All the cool stuff that Steph did around life in the flowers, in terms of both what's a flower for, the whole making a fruit, as well as all the cool stuff about pollinators and identifying pollinators. I'm still stuck on the 450 native bees in BC. That's so cool. And then the cloud watching activities. So the cloud charts, the cloud identification information, and the cloud viewer. So we will send you all those pretty well right after this webinar is done. And yeah, we'll also be sending you any notes in the chat and any links that we've used as well in a follow-up email.
So Sue, could you just share the contact information as well? Because we we've put all of our emails here for you. So if you want to contact any of us at the bottom here, you'll see our email addresses under Wild BC Facilitators. And we highly recommend that you register for the HCTF Education newsletter if you haven't already. Lots of fabulous resources, and they'll share events and news and information. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all the regular things. And I think for the first time ever, we're on time and can answer some questions. I noticed somebody asked if we could share our slides as well, especially the ones with the bees and pollinators. And I don't see why not. We'll send that in a PDF as well to all of you. So yeah, please throw a question in the chat, or we can stop sharing too, and we can put everyone on gallery, and you can ask us some questions. I think Jennifer has her hand up.
Hi, I just, in case anybody was interested, I'm in Kelowna, and I had a research student from UBCO study bees in my garden because I was on a program called the Wild Bee Ambassador program, and it ended up giving a really, really thorough, much more thorough report than I expected, and it has all the native bees and the numbers of them and what I can do to improve my garden for bees. So if anybody's interested in it, it's quite a long report, but I'd be happy to share that with anybody.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I'll write my name in the comments. My name is Paige Libanos. I'm also in Kelowna, and I would love to see that. I was just talking with our other outdoor ed teacher.
Sure.
Over some of that stuff.
Let's see if
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'll write my email in the
yeah, or I can do it to you because I haven't got a pencil. Came in from grocery shopping. Oh, here we go. I can write it on the back of my. So
perfect. I'll just type it in the chat. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, and Paige, if you do that, I can connect you with Jennifer.
Thanks.
And one thing that we'll also be sharing with you is some information on how to make bee houses. So there's certain native bees that you can easily make a house for your garden and attract some of those native pollinators.
Well, yeah, you might also want to tell people that in the spring, don't clean your garden up too soon. Like, don't make your garden bare in the fall, because the bees need all the refuge and rough leaves that are in your garden after the blooming, and they nest in there. So if you go in your garden and throw all that stuff out, you're disturbing those bees, those solitary nesters, long before they should be disturbed.
A lot of native bees, they make their nests in hollow stems. And so often those are the old flowers that have gone to seed and are just kind of standing there looking kind of messy and dead. But those are actually really important habitat, as well as areas under leaves, fallen leaves, or in the ground. So they're nesting in little burrows and hollows. I
feel a fall webinar topic coming on about leaving all your leaf litter there.
That's right. Anything that says to keep your garden a mess is just really great reinforcement, I think, of what we should be doing.
All right. Well, unless we've got any questions, I think we'll wrap up here. Steph and Sue and I will hang on for a few minutes if you want to stick around and ask us questions. But thank you so much for joining us today. And on behalf of HCTF Education, we're just so happy to have you.
Thanks, folks. Great to see you all.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.